Have you ever witnessed a situation where injustice seemed so obvious that it was impossible to ignore? What if, at the moment it seemed lost, someone unexpected came to turn the game? Sometimes the most common places hide stories that no one expects, and a simple day on the bank can become something that everyone there would never forget. Hey, you who are listening to this story, have you subscribed to the channel? Don't miss more exciting stories like this. Comment down here. What kind of story do you like to hear the most? And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I will love to know. Your support makes all the difference. How many times do we judge a person for appearance or age? Does the rush of everyday life justify the lack of empathy with those who only need a little patience? The truth is that respect should not be a favor. It is a right. And this story is proof that what seems to be just another normal morning can become a lesson for a lifetime. Respect is not a favor. It is a right that should never be forgotten. It was early morning when Dona Marta, at the age of 76, joined the bank carrying a bag that already had many stories to tell. His hands cared for a small roll with the lines in line, while his eyes sought, with hope, some friendly face amid the hasty movement of people. She needed to solve something simple: withdraw her retirement. However, for those who do not master technology and face the coldness of attendance, even the most basic can become a challenge. Minutes passed, then almost an hour. People came in and out as she was still there, invisible to the eyes of those who said she was too busy to help. With each attempt to ask, he received glances of impatience or sharp phrases that looked like dagged words. In the middle of the room, some customers grunted, bothered by the delay. "It must be one of those old women who don't know how to use the cashier," a young man muttered, stirring on his cell phone without even looking at her. Dona Marta heard, felt, but swallowed his pride and tried again to seek help from the counter. And it was then that, without realizing it, he was about to experience a moment that would change the course of that day and leave everyone gaping. The bank's environment was loaded. The people who once just grumbled now watched Dona Marta's discomfort as if she was part of everyday life. She shared the tears discreetly, determined not to crumble in front of everyone. But what weighed most was not employee contempt or customers' impatience. It was the feeling of invisibility. There, no one seemed to care, until the automatic glass door opened. The usual entry sound was no different from any other day, but this time the change in the environment was immediate. Some turned around, others remained busy, until a young man in line murmured, "Isn't it possible? Is he?" Firm and compassionate steps echoed the marble floor. Dwayne Johnson entered the bench wearing simple clothes, black t-shirt, jeans, and spent boots. But its unmistakable size and presence soon caught the eye. At first, there was a mix of surprise and unbelief. It was not every day that someone in that size and fame appeared there, without security or cameras. The manager, who moments before he treated Dona Marta with disdain, straightened the hasty jacket and forced a smile. "Mr. Johnson, what a surprise. How can we help you?" Dwayne did not answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on Dona Marta, still close to the counter, trying to recompose the dignity that had been gone down minutes earlier. The silence in the environment has become dense. Without a hurry, he walked to her. "Madam, are you okay?" His voice was calm, but he carried a firmness that immediately imposed respect. Dona Marta looked up, surprised. I was just trying to withdraw my money, but I think I'm disturbing—" "You're not disturbing anyone," said Dwayne, throwing a straight look to the attendant and the manager. There was a weight in his words, not angry, but something deeper, almost like a silent reminder of what it is human. The manager advanced, laughing nervously. "It was just a misunderstanding, Mr. Johnson. Does it happen that we have procedures and—" "Procedures?" Dwayne interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Is your procedure humiliating elderly customers? Ignore someone who just wants hers by the right, because if so, you may need to review your definition of service." The murmur between customers has increased. Some, once indifferent, now they looked at the ground, embarrassed. The attendant who had treated badly Dona Marta retreated a visibly uncomfortable step. I was just following the standards," stammered the employee. "Rules do not replace humanity," Dwayne replied without raising his voice, but with a tone he made until the most distant pay attention. He then turned to Dona Marta with a kind smile. "Can I help you solve this?" She hesitated. "I don't want to disturb." "You're not bothering anyone," he insisted. "Let's go." With firm steps, Dwayne led Dona Marta back to the counter. The attendant, now sweating, tried to streamline the process, but Dwayne put his hand over the counter. Calmly, "Do it right and with respect." While the procedures were resolved, a boy who was in line pulled his mother by the arm. "Mother, why were you treating Mrs. Badley like that?" The embarrassed woman just lowered her head. Small gestures and looks in the environment revealed widespread discomfort, not because Dwayne was there, but by the mirror that this situation was reflecting on everyone. With the operation completed, Dona Marta received the money with handy hands. I don't even know how to thank." "You don't have to thank me," said Dwayne. "I just want you to be treated as it deserves." He then turned to the employees. "I hope today you will serve something bigger than this here. Because no one, and I say no one, should go through what this lady went through." The silence still dominated the bank. Looks crossed. Someone in the background started to applaud shyly. Soon, others joined, until a collective applause took over. The environment, not only for the presence of Dwayne Johnson, but for the courage that few would have to face such a situation with that stance. Dwayne looked around, the eyes finding each person there. Respect begins when we decide to see the other, not when someone famous appears. Without another word, he helped Dona Marta keep the money carefully and led her to the exit. Outside, the sun shone as if the day had taken another direction. Outside the bench, the weather seemed to have calmed down. Dona Marta straightened the bag, still absorbing everything that had happened. Beside her side, Dwayne Johnson watched her with a light smile, but her eyes carried a determination that had not gone unnoticed inside that environment minutes before. When they prepared to follow their way, the glass door opened again with a snap. He was the manager, visibly distressed. "Mr. Johnson, please, can we talk?" Dwayne stared at him for a moment and then came back to Dona Marta. "Do you want me to stay?" She shook her head. "You've done more than I could imagine, my son." "Still," said Dwayne, turning to the manager, "what do you have to say that you couldn't have spoken before when she needed it?" The manager wiped his sweaty forehead with a handkerchief. I'm sorry for the situation. It was a mistake, a communication failure." "It wasn't just a communication failure," interrupted Dwayne. "It was a lack of respect, something that has not resolved with vague excuses at the door of a bank." Customers and employees who were still inside watched by the window, some with cell phones in hand, recording the scene. Dwayne realized, but her posture was still firm and serene. "It was not there for attention. I was there because I believed what I did." "Understand," the manager continued. "We have internal policies. Sometimes our employees just follow protocols. Protocols that humiliate people?" Dwayne crossed her arms. "So maybe it's time to review these protocols. Because today was Dona Marta. Tomorrow it can be anyone here. You have responsibility with those who enter those doors. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." The manager, unaware of how to react, looked at the attendant who had destroyed Dona Marta. The young man was shrunk behind the counter. "You," called Dwayne. "What do you have to say?" The attendant hesitated, the red face. I didn't think it was so serious. I was just annoyed by the line and I thought she was curling." "He thought," Dwayne stepped ahead. "Looking at someone and judging is easier than asking what she needed. How many other people have you treated like this?" The silence became heavy. Even customers who once were impatient now avoided viewing Dwayne. The truth, hard and straightforward, hovered in the air. "This can't end like this," said a lady who watched from afar. "He's right. We are too silent too. Today was with her, but how many times have we not ignored here?" Others started agreeing. Voices that once silent now came together, not in turmoil, but in claim. The manager looked around, realizing that the situation had completely left control, and that it took more than empty words to remedy. Let's do better, said Dwayne, breaking the tension atmosphere with a calmer tone. Train your employees to understand that people are not queue numbers, and that no one gets here to be treated as a nuisance. If you want this bank to be respected, start respecting people. The manager nodded, head down. Let's implement changes. Starting today, I promise. Dwayne looked at him, evaluating sincerity in the voice. Then it gave a slight nod. Promises only have value with action. I hope to see difference if I come back here. With that, he turned to Dona Marta. Let's go? She smiled, thrilled. You don't exist, appeared like an angel. I'm not angel, no, he replied with a laugh. I just can't stand to see injustice. As they walked down the sidewalk, some people from the bench went out and cheered again. But Dwayne didn't seek applause. It was about Dona Marta, about all who have gone through something similar and were silent. The manager remained standing at the door, observing the crowd that dispersed more consciously than he had when he arrived. Within you, I knew that day would not be forgotten anytime soon. The path to Dwayne's car was silently traveled. Dona Marta, still holding firmly her now heavier bag with retirement money, launched discreet glances for the man beside him. There was something beyond gratitude in her eyes, a mixture of curiosity and a strange sense of familiarity she couldn't explain. I still don't know how to thank, she said, breaking the silence. No one has ever done something like that for me. Not that way. Dwayne smiled. Sometimes all we need is someone who looks and says, I see you. No one should go through what you went through inside. She nodded, looking at the sidewalk ahead. Life is like this. When we get older, it seems to be invisible. Dwayne stopped walking, watching her carefully. You shouldn't feel that way. It has more value than you think. Dona Marta bit her lower lip, hesitant. There was a question burning in his mind from the moment he had entered the bench. Can I ask you something? Of course, he said, without thinking twice. Yuba, there's a way of talking, and a look that reminds me of someone, she said with a sad smile. My eldest son. He also had this brightness in his eyes, always helping everyone. If it went too early. Dwayne heard in silence, respecting the emotion that was beginning to overflow from her words. He worked under construction, she continued. It was strong like you, and I had a giant heart. Do you know what hurts me? Is that in the end no one seemed to remember who he was, only the void was. The weight of those words fell between them like a passing shadow, but Dwayne, with a light sigh, put his hand on her shoulder. Sometimes the people who do the most for others are the least who receive recognition, but that doesn't erase what they have left in the world. They continued to walk, and soon arrived at the car parked around the corner. Dwayne opened the door for her, but before she entered, Dona Marta looked at him again, squeezing her eyes as if she sought a distant memory. Wait, he murmured. I know I've seen you somewhere. It's not just on television. There's something else. Dwayne smiled sideways. I've traveled a lot. I met a lot of people. No, it's more than that, she insisted. You said no one should feel invisible. This is something my son said. I always remembered it when I was down. He told me stories of people who helped, said we never know who you may need a push. Dwayne seemed to hesitate for a second, but then stuck her hand in her pocket and took a simple little chain with a worn metal pendant. He held her for a moment before extending to her. This pendant was your son, wasn't it? Dona Marta's eyes widened. She put her hand to her mouth, the tears already escaping without control. How do you have this? Your son and... I worked together years ago, Dwayne explained, the smoother voice than ever. We were in the same site of works. I was just a guy trying to get me back without much, and he was one of the few who believed in me. He said I was able to much more. He said the world needed people that does not give up. Dona Marta squeezed the little chain against her chest, sobbing softly. My God. He said this to everyone. But I didn't know that he had made so much difference. He gave me that on the last day we worked together, continued Dwayne. I told me to keep it, and remember that no matter the size of the obstacle, we can always choose to do the right thing. I have kept it since. She shook her head, thrilled. I thought I had lost it forever. "I wanted to return before," said Dwayne, "but I never found the right time, to this day." Dona Marta held his hand tightly, the wrinkles marked by life contrasting with her calloused but firm hand of the man who was now more than a stranger who had helped her on the bench. "My son would be so proud to see what you became," she whispered. Dwayne took a deep breath. "If it wasn't for him, maybe I wasn't here. Sometimes the help we give someone back in ways we can't imagine." She smiled in the tears. "You not only helped me today, I brought me a piece of it back." The sky, which once looked grey that tumultuous morning, now let some shy sunlight escape. Dona Marta looked up, feeling the heat on her face while still squeezing the little chain against her heart. Dwayne stepped back, putting her hands in her pockets. He was not forgotten, and today proved that. She nodded, wiping her tears with her handkerchief. "Thank you, really, for everything." "I thank you," he said. "Your son taught me more than he ever imagined." Dona Marta kept the little chain in her shirt pocket with almost sacred care. The smile that now illuminated his face was different. From that shy early in the morning, he was loaded with something he hadn't felt long ago: hope. Beside him, Dwayne watched the street movement while cars passed and pedestrians followed their routines. For most, it was just another ordinary day, but for both of them, that moment carried a weight that words could not describe. "I can give you a ride home," offered Dwayne, pointing to the car. Dona Marta hesitated for a moment but eventually accepted. "It would be good. My legs are no longer the same." The route was quiet. Along the way, she told small stories from her neighborhood, the afternoons that passed in the square with friends, and how the world seemed to have changed too fast to accompany her. Dwayne listened carefully, interspersing with comments that laughed at her. There was something comforting to be able to share those memories with someone who really listened. Arriving in front of a small house with simple facade and plants carefully arranged on the porch, Dona Marta turned to him. "Want her to come in? Can I make a coffee? It's not every day I get such a visit." "I would love it," said Dwayne with a smile. Inside the house, the walls were decorated with old photographs, memories of a life full of moments and people. A picture frame on the shelf caught his attention. It was a picture of a young man with an open smile and certain eyes. Dona Marta noticed his gaze. "This is my son. It was taken shortly before he went to that work in another city. He always said that the important thing was to make a difference, even if it was in one person's life." "He did more than that," said Dwayne, watching the photo with respect. As the coffee passed, Dona Marta sat in the armchair, looking at her own hands. "You know, I spent a lot of time wondering if he had left any marks in this world. Today I understood, yes, and in a way I would never have imagined." Shortly thereafter, with 2 steaming cups in hand, the two talked about little things in life, like old acquaintances who, despite the short time of living, shared an inexplicable bond. Outside, the sky was beginning to dye with orange tones. Dwayne got up, realizing it was time to leave. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Dona Marta. You are stronger than you think." She held his hand firmly. "And you, it's the living proof that kindness still exists in this world. My son would be proud of the man you have become." As he left the house, Dwayne stopped a moment on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath as he looked at the horizon. He was not seeking recognition or applause. For him, there was something much greater to know that he could repay the goodness he once received. The next day, the movement in the bank was different. Employees exchanged accomplices, talking low on the events of the previous day. The most serious expression manager gathered the team early. Yesterday was a shock to all. Thus, he started looking at each face present. "We can't erase what happened, but we can change from now on. From today, no one here will treat a client with less than absolute respect. If someone doesn't agree, the door is there." The silence that followed was not of resistance, but of reflection. The attendant who had rumored Dona Marta was the first to speak. I was wrong. I never thought a simple moment could affect someone so much. I want to do it differently." A few days later, a new plate was installed at the bank entrance. "Here, all people are seen, all stories matter." Back in Dona Marta's neighborhood, something had also changed. The neighbors who previously barely exchanged words began to greet it more hot. Children played on the street and waved as he saw her on the porch. And on a sunny morning, an envelope was left on your door. Inside, there was a letter written by hand. Dona Marta, thanks for reminding me of what really matters. That this little chain remains a symbol of strength and kindness. Take good care of her. Dwayne. She held the paper with trembling hands, but her heart was serene. Sometimes the most unlikely encounters are those that make the most lives. And on that ordinary day that started with tears, there was a souvenir that she would carry forever. Dona Marta remained sitting on the porch, feeling the light breeze in the morning touching her face. Dwayne's letter was resting on his lap, while the little chain now hanging around his neck shone softly in the sunlight. That small piece of metal carried more than memories. It was a symbol of a past that connected to the gift in ways she would never imagine. The people passing by the street beckoned with a heat that once seemed distant. It was as if something invisible had been broken, allowing the looks to intersect with more humanity. Dona Marta, with a serene smile, returned every nod with a kind look. Dwayne, elsewhere in the city, straightened his backpack on his shoulders as he walked along the busy sidewalks. His steps were firm, but his gaze carried the lightness of who had done the right thing. He knew that life was going ahead, with new challenges ahead, but that meeting with Dona Marta would be marked in her memory. Some actions do not need public recognition to have value, the silent impact they leave on people's hearts. In the bank, the new sign caught the attention of those who entered. Customers stopped reading, some with discreet smiles, some with thoughtful expressions. The team, which previously acted for habit and indifference, now showed care that was surprising to the older goers. Deep changes do not happen overnight, but every gesture of respect planted a seed that was beginning to flourish. Stories like Dona Marta and Dwayne show that gestures of kindness have a range that goes beyond what you can see. A word of support, an act of courage, or a moment of empathy can transform someone's reality in seconds. The world is full of people facing silent battles, and sometimes the difference between a bad day and a fresh start is seen, heard, and respected. Every story has hidden layers that only reveal themselves when looking beyond appearances. The lady who many ignored carried a story of strength and loss. The man who silently entered the bench carried a promise made years earlier. And everyone who witnessed that meeting came out with something more. A living memory that kindness is never in vain. The true character of a person shows himself in the choices he makes when no one is paying attention. And sometimes a simple act of courage inspires others to see beyond their own reflection. Because in the end, respect is not a gift to be given, it is a right to be recognized.